Hey, how's it going? Welcome to the Football Diary podcast. It might be gloomy outside, but it's been an absolute ray of sunshine seeing the Premier League back in action after international break. And we're not just saying that because Man City got thumped at home. Although that will be a talking point on the podcast today, along with Arsenal's 3-0 win over Nottingham Forest, which was a fascinating encounter to say the least. But I'm here with Dave today. We're recording this just before the Man United-Ipswich game, so we don't yet know what the Ruben Amorim era looks like. But how are you feeling about that, Dave, before we start?
I think there's a lot of curiosity, about how we're going to set up and what this new team's going to look like and the lineup. I think there's a lot of questions, and it's just going to be fascinating to see how we operate under this new manager. I think it's going to be early days to see how we will perform.
Got to start somewhere, haven't we? But speaking of starting somewhere, we asked our subscribers on YouTube what we should start this podcast with, and it was overwhelmingly Man City Tottenham as well as Arsenal Forest. Now, I'm more than happy to start with Man City Tottenham, Dave, because it was a really uncharacteristic game for Man City at the Etihad, wasn't it? Losing 4-0 to a Tottenham team who have been so up and down, I think it's fair to say. Before this game, they'd won 5 and lost 5, so it was literally all or nothing for them. This afternoon against Man City, it was an all occasion with that guy who we were almost criticising last week, James Maddison, taking centre stage. But it was an all-round great performance from everyone in the team for Spurs, wasn't it? And before we look at kind of City's shortcomings and, you know, their tough run of form of late, City were only as bad as Tottenham were good, really. Every single player seemed to play their part, didn't they?
Definitely. And to be honest, I think before this game, I think a lot of people expected City to come out the traps and put on a show, especially obviously in the news of Guardiola signing that contract extension. There definitely seemed to be a bit more optimism around the ground, even though obviously been on this difficult run of recent times. So I think for it to have panned out the way it did, it was a bit of a shock to the system, I've got to say. I think the way Spurs performed, I've got to give them credit first and foremost, because I think that is probably the best game I've seen them play as a unit. And I think from every single name on that team sheet, you've got to say they did their job to perfection, and it was almost the perfect performance. It might not have been the best performance in terms of, I think, fluidity, in terms of some of the attacking play. I think it was more of in spells, but we've seen that over the years against City. You have to pick your moments. And especially in that first half, Tottenham were just absolutely clinical.
Yeah.
And it was written in the stars it was going to be James Maddison to come in. And let's be honest, it's vintage Maddison, wasn't it? It's just something we've not seen him pull out of the bag too often since he's arrived at Spurs. He had that really great start to his Spurs career, and he's fallen off a little bit since then. But to see him come in and do that, it's just great to see. Because he's just an absolute maverick, isn't he? And he loves causing absolute havoc in those positions. I think he really toyed, with that City defence and midfield at times in those holes. And just to see him on those marauding runs, countless times, especially in the second half when they were looking to counter, it's more of what we expect from him, I think.
Yeah, I think the way that he finished his goals, especially Maddison, was incredible. Like his little dink over the goalkeeper was really hard to pull off. So his technique is brilliant. But we know that, don't we? We said in the last pod in his defence that his technical ability is superb. It's just whether he fits into the balance of this Tottenham team at certain times. But this particular Tottenham setup was set up perfectly for him. And I think he was a real beneficiary of obviously Son finding him for that pass as well for that goal. I think the fullbacks look great for Spurs as well. Padre Porro is such a threat on the break. And I think the counter for Spurs was one of the key ingredients to this game going the way it did. Like, I think Man City looked really lethargic tracking back. In fact, I didn't see many of their players tracking back. But then Spurs was so good at transitioning when they got the ball that it was up to a player like Maddison to finish it off, and he did. But all of Spurs' goals were brilliant, weren't they, really? But who stood out for you in this Spurs team? We said Maddison, but out of the rest of the team, who else do you think played their part?
I think Papisar had a really good game. That's probably one of the best games I've seen.
Yeah, he is the balance, isn't he? I think that midfield needs someone like him.
Positionally, I think that midfield got it perfectly. And I think as soon as they went 2-0 ahead, you looked at that midfield setup, and positionally their awareness was brilliant. And they plugged those holes and ensured that City couldn't get through them. City were looking to kind of go down the outside. We had no choice, really. And I think they didn't really have the players in in that team to be able to do that. Aside from probably Savinho, who I don't think had his best game. I think a better player to suit that kind of way of playing, if you go looking to go down flanks, is Jack Grealish, who obviously came on the back end of the second half. But they really found it difficult to get through that Tottenham midfield in defence. And I was actually a bit worried for Spurs at the start of the game when I saw Ben Davies and Dragusin starting, who I thought performed brilliantly, to be honest. I think Dragusin, since he's come in, he's had a little bit of a tough time at times in this game and lacked, obviously, struggled for minutes. But to see him come in and perform like that, I mean, Haaland was largely anonymous. There's a couple of brilliant chances he had, which, he really struggled with, to be honest. But aside from that, it was quite quiet on the whole.
Yeah, I think we'll talk about City and their finishing and how the game went for them in a moment. But just the last word on Spurs, really. When they're good, they're great, aren't they? And I think the key player for me, and we mentioned this on the pod before, is Dejan Kulusevski. He's just a relentless runner. And I think the City backline really struggled to deal with his ingenuity. And when he gets the ball, he always looks for that forward pass. He always looks to run at the players. Kyle Walker had an absolutely torrid time against whoever he came up against, really. But I think Kulusevski was one of those magicians that really set the pace for the team. And I can't see him not starting for Spurs now. I know we've sung his praises in the past, but Kulusevski's awesome, isn't he? What a player.
Yeah, I think his link-up play is so underrated, I think. And for a player with his engine as well, just completely runs all game. I think what he does allow is he allows the likes of Brennan Johnson, who had a bit of a rough time, I think, from Spurs fans before his purple streak that he had. It takes a little bit of pressure off his shoulders. I think it's the same with Maddison. They shouldn't be looking to I think, criticise some of their youngest players. This team they've all been equally guilty, I think, of underperforming and probably not reaching their levels at times, as we've seen with James Maddison and Kulusevski. He's blown hot and cold at time, but we've seen now it seems like he's really hitting his stride. And yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, to see what the level of this Spurs side could be.
That's the conundrum, yeah.
That's the thing now. I was just thinking to myself last night. I was thinking, who Spurs got next? And it just makes you think of, obviously, when they beat United and then obviously went and lost to Brighton next game, didn't they? After being 2-0 up.
Lost to Ipswich as well along the way. The wins have been amazing, but their defeats have been so poor. But then they've tended not to lose by more than a goal. So it's not like it's a complete catastrophe for them. It's only a goal or so in it. But sometimes the nature of the defeat is what kind of stands out the most, isn't it? But the nature of their victories has been incredible. So an amazing performance from the whole of the Spurs team, which is what the Premier League needs. I think competitive Spurs is really important for the league. But Manchester City losing, Dave, I'm trying to say this without smiling too hard, because it is nice to see them go through a patch like this, because it's just unheard of in the Pep Guardiola era especially. But I think in their modern history, they haven't lost this many games in a row, 5 games in a row, for the first time since Stuart Pearce was in charge. It's been that long. 5 defeats in a row is so rare for any team, but for City especially. How are you feeling about it before we break down their performance? I know it's difficult to say neutrally as a Manchester United fan, but what are you looking at and seeing? Does it feel like the end of an era, or do you feel like it's just a blip? It's easy to catastrophise, isn't it? But this didn't look like anything we've ever seen from City, did it?
First, let's not ignore the fact that this squad is littered with ridiculously talented players. I think there are still a lot of players in there who are still getting used to this league and getting used to this being in the City system. You actually look at a lot of the experienced players they've lost over the last couple of years, the likes of Riyad Mahrez. Obviously, Gundogan left. I think, to be honest, he's not looked at himself since he's come back into the City team either. There is a lot of experienced players in there that I think have obviously gone out that exit door and have left holes in that squad. And new players have come in. I think they've struggled a little bit, to be honest. You can definitely see the problems in this side at the moment. The relationship, I think, between midfield and attack is just completely absent.
Yeah, fair point.
There's countless times in this game when, if the midfield would receive the ball, there just doesn't seem to be any fluidity in that link-up play. no urgency even. It's just so slow and zombie-like, which is not something we're used to, I think,
I
with
think that's
with
the
the
thing. It's the
Guardiola team.
pace of everything for me. And when you contrast that to how Tottenham was they're so tight to their men, weren't they? Man to man, they were kind of sticking quite close to them defensively. When they're out of possession, they were brilliant. But City out of possession looked all at sea. Like they didn't run for anything. They didn't track back. They didn't follow their man. And this isn't just the defence either, right the way through the team. The midfield looked completely anonymous. Gundogan looked his age. And Haaland looked so isolated. I think the best chances, if you can call them that, were half chances that he created for himself, Erling Haaland. And you can see he's the player that's getting the most frustrated because those wingers aren't giving him the assists and the service, like you said, that he needs. And why isn't Grealish starting in this occasion? You know, he's had a rest. He's not played for England, has he? So it's not like he's been burnt out in the last couple of weeks. So he would have been perfect. So it might be a case of just a few players out of form. But it doesn't seem to like the players fundamentally are doing enough work or running enough kilometres in a game to kind of match their opponent. And in this case,
I thought the movement,
outran them completely.
I thought the movement was shocking on the whole, to be honest. I think even Haaland at times was just so static. You were looking like, just make something happen. Just make a run in behind, or it just seems like they were lacking ideas in this game, and you were looking for somebody to kind of step up. I think not until Kevin De Bruyne came on. Even though I don't think he was particularly brilliant, but he obviously put in a couple of brilliant whip balls in, which I think Haaland got, within probably a few inches of. But other than that, I just think that was the shocking thing for me. Is you always expected them. I just thought they're going to score a goal. Like they'll score a minimum of a goal, or they'll take a chance. They'll definitely create 3 or 4 very good opportunities, but it just didn't come for them. I think that's the surprising thing for me.
Yeah, let's not catastrophise it too much. We've been down this route with Man City before at this stage of the season. They never do well around Christmas time, do they? But in January onwards, they tend to motor through. So it's obviously a big question mark whether we'll see that this time around. At the minute, they're really going through it, aren't they? And their next game is Liverpool. And I think that is a big concern, I think, for City fans and for Pep Guardiola, because they look great at the minute. But a team that is looking much better, Dave, is Arsenal. A lot of their players have come back into the team after injury, and they beat Nottingham Forest, a really tricky opponent at the minute, 3-0 in what I thought was probably their best first half of football that I've seen this season. They played brilliantly, didn't they? 3 really, really good goals as well. They were just by far the better team against Forest, but good to see a team performance like that. I think Odegaard was instrumental, definitely, but they were missing Declan Rice, Kai Havertz, Gabriel Martinelli. Neither of them started the game, but they kind of looked more coherent in some ways, didn't they?
Yeah, I think there were areas of their game which they did really well in. I think the massive sort of plus for them is obviously Odegaard being back in this team, but I think they definitely targeted that left-hand side of Forest's side of the field. I think Timber, Odegaard and Saka.
Yeah, brilliant.
As potent as I've seen him, to be honest, actually. And he's having a great season. I just think they really kind of overloaded that side of the field, and Forest actually struggled a little bit. They definitely targeted that side. And Moreno, for as good as he is going forward, we did speak about sort of like his shortcomings with his game, and defensively he's probably not the best fullback around. So I think they did target him, and it showed. He just couldn't deal with Saka. Saka just honestly caused him a lot of misery.
Ran him ragged, yeah. Well, I think his link up with Odegaard is what they've been missing as well. I think Odegaard is just so instrumental to not just the midfield, but the transition into attack. And I think Forest looked panicky at times by just how effective they were with these little passing triangles in the final third. And they got to kind of the 18-yard box, and you could see them, getting into the zone where they could win a penalty if one foot was dangled in incorrectly by a Forest defender. I think Forest looked terrified of that to begin with because the passing was so rapid towards goal. And that was instrumental from, I think, Odegaard. He was the one who kind of created that pace going forward. And to be fair to Forest, they blocked a lot of the opportunities that came their way, but they were like trying to pick a lock, Arsenal, weren't they? And I think that's kind of when they're at their best sometimes, when there's a low block there and they have the attack set up the way they have, where Martinelli isn't putting crosses in. It's more like they're kind of picking their way into the middle, and I think they did that superbly.
I think in terms of how the way their attack operated, it's probably one of the best games they've had this season. Arsenal, they look so threatening all throughout. I do think probably Nuno was a little bit hamstrung in this game. I don't know whether he quite got it tactically, but I think that was probably down to a couple of players not being available, Anderson and the other being Morgan Gibbs-White.
And Chris Wood as well. I thought he was missed. I know he was rested, but I think, Awoniyi looked isolated, didn't he?
Wasn't the ideal game for Awoniyi to come into with his fitness issues of late. I think it was a difficult game for him. But if you look back to the Liverpool game, which they obviously won 1-0 earlier on the season, Anthony Elanga and Hudson-Odoi obviously were absent from that starting lineup. They almost operated with 5 midfielders in there, or 4 midfielders, 4 centre mids, and then Gibbs-White in behind Chris Wood. And I think that just helped them plug any gaps that Liverpool operated in.
Yeah,
especially in between that midfield and defence. And I think that's probably something would have better suited against Arsenal in this game. I think they just missed Elliot Anderson in those areas of the game where they are in possession of the ball. I just think he helps it tick over a little bit better, and their use of the ball is more efficient. I just think they turned the ball over too many times in this game. I know it's easier said than done. You're always going to have less of the ball, I think, against Arsenal. But I think when you do have it, being efficient with it, and they definitely struggled, I think, with their midfield options. They are lacking quite a few in there. So let's not forget Danilo's injured, Sangare as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's important. I think Forest, obviously, not get too carried away. Obviously, they've won such a great run, aside from these last couple of games. And they're still having a very good season. Let's not forget that. But when they get a couple of these injured players back, I think it will help them.
Yeah, agreed. Like the midfield was bypassed by Arsenal quite a lot of the time. It went from defence to attack so quickly because there was no resistance from the middle. And Anthony Elanga subbed at half time as well, kind of showed how Nuno saw the game going. And I think he admitted in the post-match that they were just second best to Arsenal. They just came up against an opponent that was just better than them in every area of the pitch. What would the game have panned out like if they had all of their first choice players available? Who knows? Would have been a much different result, I think, to 3-0, definitely. But yeah, no need to panic for Forest. I don't think Forest fans are looking at this and going, Nuno out by any stretch. They're having a good start to the season, and this is just them coming up against a superior opponent in some ways, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's the thing, really, isn't it? I think looking at the games, they'll definitely be targeting some of those games where 3 points are going to be more achievable in the next few things. You look at where they were beginning of last season. It's night and day, I think, really. So I think they did do well in patches in this game. I think they defended very well in open play at times. But what Arsenal do is they switch play so well. Those opening gaps, which it's so difficult to close them when a team like Arsenal is shifting the ball so quickly from side to side. Pace. I think it is difficult to defend. So I think I do think they actually did really well at times. But inevitably, they will create chances, as any quality side will.
One player we haven't mentioned as well is Ethan Nwaneri, 17-year-old Nwaneri, who had another great game, and he looks ready for first-team football now, doesn't he? Like I don't know who I compare him to, but he's such a great little option going forward, isn't he? And for his age, he just plays like he's 5 years older. What a great prospect he's going to be.
Yeah, he's a great technician. I think seeing him kind of academy, I watched him a little bit actually, like under 18s, and he was always highlighted as a massive talent. I think there was that stage, wasn't there, about what he was going to do, and they obviously gave him that appearance at 15 years of age to get him to sign that new deal. And to see him getting minutes is great. I think it's never great. I think the situation Arsenal in is when Odegaard isn't in that team. I think they lack a player of seniority, for sure, of his ilk, and it's never great to put that kind of pressure on such a young player and expect such big things and consistency, I think, as well. It's never going to be the case. No matter how good you are, there's so few players, I think, in the world, let alone the league, who can come in and can perform and put performances in at such a young age. So as long as they're realistic, I think, in their expectations, it's great to see him come in and score that goal. I think he took it really well.
Yeah, I think they'll manage his game time with that in mind, to be fair, and they have done so far, but it's just tempting to not kind of get too carried away when a player so young performs so well and looks so mature for his years. But yeah, really good prospect for Arsenal. Let's talk about Fulham Wolves, shall we? Fulham opened the scoring, obviously, with a wonderful goal from Alex Iwobi, which was, such a great finish. And it looked like Fulham were on the way to kind of scoring a couple more because they were quite relentless in that first half. But Wolves came back and showed the kind of spirit I think we've seen in the last couple of games to win. And another game where Matheus Cunha took centre stage with his own like mini goal of the month competition going on, some absolute bangers that he scored this week. But Wolves look like they're fighting, don't they? And they look like the team I think we know that they're capable of being, which is a really talented attacking outfit.
Definitely. I think even I said last week I was a little bit worried for Gary O'Neill, and I think some of the talent that he's got at his disposal, they should definitely be doing a lot better. And they've shown it in spells during games at times, but not consistently, and not been able to perform for the 90 minutes. We've seen them concede late on in games. Obviously the Man City game when they were so unfortunate to get on. But yeah, I think they were so potent in attack at times, some of the play. And I think that's probably one of the best games I've seen from Mario Lemina for a while. You look at a lot of their goals. It began with him cutting play out, making interceptions in midfield. And obviously that ball for Cunha's first goal was outstanding. Probably one of the best balls. I think it probably won't get the praise it will, because everyone will say, that's route one, it's just a ball straight over. But it's been perfectly measured. But I think Cunha does make it probably look a little bit better than what it was. That takedown was unbelievable. And I think if anybody who saw Harry Kane's goal this weekend, I think it was on Friday.
Yeah, against Augsburg.
That first touch, it was as good as that. Probably better, to be honest. There's not many better first touches you'll see than that, and the calmness just to stroke it back by the keeper was great. I also think that Andre coming back into the midfield, you can give him a little bit more of an element of control.
Yeah.
I think the possession stats, I think that Fulham had about 60%, which you'd probably expect them to have, probably being at home. And, they've got some real good technicians in that midfield. But I think Andre in there did give them a little bit better balance. And I think it gave the likes of Joao Gomez to go further up the pitch and get into those areas. Took his goal really well. And we've seen him throughout the season, actually.
Yeah, the only concern I've got with Wolves, though, is defensively. Because, they went 1-0 down. I think it was mainly from a mistake from Ait-Nouri, wasn't it? So there's still fragility at the back, but I don't think you can doubt their talent going forward. They've got some really exciting midfielders and attackers, but 25 years old, Matheus Cunha is inevitably going to be linked elsewhere. And I said on Blue Sky, I'm on Blue Sky, by the way, check out me on that, that he looks like the kind of player that would benefit more from staying with Wolves for longer, because it's a good relationship between him and the fans, and he's just a likeable guy, speaks great English. He really fits some of the culture of Wolves really well. And we've seen what's happened to players who have left the club more recently, for Saudi Arabia, for example, let's say. They've missed the kind of attention they get from the Wolves fans and the kind of adulation they receive. I think Cunha is in the right place right now for his development. And as long as Wolves can stay in the league, I think he should stay, don't you? I don't think there's any reason why he should look elsewhere.
I think if you're looking at it from probably a personal point of view, he might look to be playing football at a higher level, I think, in terms of, no disrespect to Wolves, but obviously European football. I think that will be an appeal. Definitely be an attractive proposition to him. So you can't fault him for that. And then if you look at how Wolves have operated in the transfer market as well, in terms of their recruitment, their incomings, as well as their outgoings, I actually think they've been quite fruitful in terms of getting the funds in and the right fees. I think for some of the players that they have bought, Diogo Jota going out to Liverpool, Pedro Neto obviously going to Chelsea. These are players who they've identified and got in, and I just think they've had so many successes over the years that if he did go, I wouldn't doubt that they'd probably be able to replace him. And they won't want to think about that at this moment in time, because he's their talisman, if we're being honest. He is producing the goods for them, scoring goals, creating opportunities for them. They are going to need him, I think. I don't think there'll be any struggles for them come, I think a few more games. I can see them racking a few more points up and pulling away from that danger.
Well, back-to-back wins now for the first time, I think, since February. So that will give them confidence straight away. And they need confidence at the minute, because I think that's the only thing missing from this Wolves team actually performing well regularly. But Fulham, by contrast, are still in 10th despite this defeat. It's a heavy defeat for them. And they're, 10th in the league now, which is still great position for them to be in. They've been really positive this season. They'll take this defeat quite hardly, but they could have streaked ahead in the first half. I mean, Raul Jimenez hit the bar, didn't it, with a vicious shot. If that had gone in, it would have been a different tone to the game, I think. And I think they were just a victim of just not being clinical enough. So just an off day, really, for Fulham, do you think? Nothing to worry about?
I think so. That was probably defensively probably one of the worst games I've seen him play for a while. I think Wolves just had too much space. And actually, their transitions were, to be fair to them, the goals were great. And
yeah, they were.
All of the goals were very, very good to watch. But I think defensively, there was too much space for Wolves to operate, and at times they did get caught out. And so I definitely think they'll be looking at that post-match and saying, yeah, they could have done better there. Like you say, they probably should have been more clinical. Like Raul Jimenez, I think I did jinx him a little bit, actually. I was singing his praises, wasn't I, last week? To miss from that position where I think everybody thought goal. You know, you're waiting for the net to bulge.
Well, hit it too hard.
Yeah, it did. It didn't need to be, did it? It just,
no.
You didn't even need to catch it clean. You know, keep it down, and that's it. So, yeah, before this week, it will be disappointing for them because they've had so many positive performances, and they would have looked at this game at home against Wolverhampton Wanderers to obviously keep that momentum going. It's a big disappointment for them, but I've no doubt that I think Marco Silva will get them back on the right track. Yeah,
I think to be fair, this kind of shown this game how close the two teams are in quality overall. So their league position should be closer than what they are. So maybe it's a sign for Wolves that they're on the right track. So we'll watch this space, shall we? What, in that note, Dave, do you think is Aston Villa's level right now? Because obviously they drew 2-2 with Crystal Palace this weekend. They're on a 6-game streak of not winning, and that's the longest run they've gone under with Unai Emery in charge. And there's a few fans, if you can call them that, on social media calling for Emery to be sacked, which is absolutely ludicrous considering they're flying in the Champions League and still very much competitive in the Premier League as well. What would you put this blip down to, first of all, before we start looking at the game itself?
It's just an extreme contrast of emotions, isn't it, from fans, obviously. Early on in the season, I think, obviously, that on the back of that win against Bayern Munich, you know, that period where they were obviously doing really well. And obviously the last few games almost must feel like a bit of a curse for them at the moment because nothing just seems to be falling for them. I think there's some positives in there. I think Watkins obviously scoring for England and scoring this goal in this game to get him back on the score sheet and back on track is great for them. There's just some players in there. I think that defence, if I'm being honest, and that partnership, centre-back partnership, really does struggle against pace, and we saw that at times in this game. Ismaila Sarr really did cause them issues, and I'll give him a lot of credit as well. I think since he came into Palace, they probably expected a little bit more from him. So I think for him to perform so well in this game was great for them. They just get caught in transition too easily, and there's just too much space there for teams to take advantage of, and we've seen it in these last few games. They're attackers as well. I just think if Watkins isn't having an absolute stormer of a match, they struggle. They've struggled to create, I think, at times. And Leon Bailey just went full for him, obviously hit the bar in this game.
Yeah, but he should have squared that as well. It felt like he was being a bit greedy in that instance. Like they're not playing as a team looking out for each other and who's in the best position as well. So, yeah, you say defensively they've been a struggle, especially playing that high line. And with probably fatigue factored in, you know, they've not been able to stop a countering team like Crystal Palace from transitioning quickly. But going forward as well, it's got to be a concern, hasn't it? But can they turn it around, I guess, in time before it becomes an issue?
I think you're looking for a bit of the leadership from some of their more experienced players, like John McGinn. Like you saw him in the international break. He pulled Scotland through, didn't he?
Yeah.
We're looking for a similar sort of, I think, similar effect from him, I think, really. And looking for him to pull Villa through, and they're just looking to get a vital 3 points to get them back on track, aren't they? It has been a bit of a struggle for them. I think it will happen for them. I think they are struggling. Obviously, the likes of the injuries they're having at the minute definitely won't be helping them. There is quality in that squad. I've always highlighted my concerns about whether they have enough strength in terms of in numbers, because I think their first 11 is great. There's probably a couple of positions we mentioned we wondered why they actually didn't address that right fullback position. It's an issue for them. Well, obviously they brought Maatsen in, And I don't actually think left
he had a
back
tough game.
Was as big an issue for them from there. Whether he can play, but they can look to move probably one of them over to the right back position. I don't know whether they considered trying that at all, but they are getting caught out there too often at the moment.
Well, I think centre-back as well. They need more depth in centre-backs that can adapt to this high line and recover with a bit of pace, because I don't think Diego Carlos is covering himself in glory with this season either. No. And they leave themselves really vulnerable when they get countered. That's a concern all round. But the midfield's got to do more too in transition. I feel like sometimes they got bypassed really quickly. And Palace, obviously, really important for them to get a point against a team like Villa, and they would be gutted to kind of lose the league twice against them. But they had no Eze in this game too, so their transitions should have been not as good as they were. They should have been easier to counter, but Villa kind of couldn't deal with it. That must be really concerning for Emery.
Yeah, and it's just frustrating, I think, because the signs have been there, like we're saying, in the last few games at times. Not just the last few games. I'd even go back to last season. You look at the Man United games, they spring to mind instantly. It's just the teams that have pace and looking to hit on the counter, they do really struggle with. And it's something that, no doubt, I think in the long term they'll be looking probably to the next transfer windows to address and probably bring in another full back and probably and potentially even the centre back, because I wonder about his sort of future prospects at this Villa side. I think Diego Carlos, they were obviously looking at, there was rumours about him moving on, wasn't there? I think even from the last transfer window, whether he'll actually be here, because I don't know if he's the right kind of profile for how they want to play.
Well, he was considered a bit of a coup at the time, so it shows how far Villa have actually come, that they're looking for players that are a different calibre now. And I don't think there's any need to panic again. I think this Premier League season is so open and they're still doing pretty well in the league and Champions League, so it's just a case of getting that win, like you said. But Palace, on the other hand, will be thrilled with a point and thrilled with the performance, and just disappointed to lose the lead really twice. Testament to Villa for kind of showing the character to come back twice. But Palace needed that really, didn't they?
Definitely. Yeah, like you say, it'll be a bit of a punch to the gut, I think, for Glasner, that he didn't get this 3 points that they're so desperately looking for.
Yeah.
But I think that, like you say, there are positives in their performance. I think at times they defended really well. I thought Margay had another brilliant game. And obviously, as Sarr, I think him obviously getting a goal and assist.
Yeah.
I think they'll be looking for more from him, because like we've mentioned, we've worried about the balance, I think, in that front line at times. Obviously, Mateta coming in and obviously relying on his goals. So I think it's still a difficult time for them, but I do think there are positives to take from this game, and it's something definitely to build on.
Elsewhere in the Premier League, though, results in the other games. Leicester lost 2-1 at home to Chelsea, and Enzo Maresca's returned to the King Power Stadium. I think a deserved win for Chelsea there, it's fair to say. And Brighton had a fantastic away victory against Bournemouth. Despite going down to 10 men, Carlos Balíba's 2 yellow cards getting him sent off. Did you see his yellows? The second one, I didn't even think was a foul. I think this is just a case for me of having VAR on second yellows, because it's such an important thing to give a card for, that you've got to be sure that it is a yellow. And I thought Balíba was really unlucky. If not a bit clumsy, he shouldn't have been sent off. Yeah,
it's another hard one, isn't it? And it's something that I do think they probably need to reevaluate and look at in the decision-making system, that they probably need to have a say on, especially when the video, the technology is there to be able to use. I think getting these decisions is absolutely crucial in balance of some of these games when
definitely
it's depending on a team obviously not going a man down. I just think it was quite unfortunate, really.
So, there was another game yesterday as well. It was a 0-0 between Everton and Brentford. And as we speak, Liverpool are just about to beat Southampton 3-2. So that extends their lead at the top. So it's all looking good for Liverpool as well. Dave, the next time we talk, we'll be able to discuss exactly what happened with the Ruben Amorim debut and how that game went. But until then, mates, thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening. If you are on socials, please do follow us, and also on Blue Sky now. So please do follow us on there. Looking forward to this week, Dave?
I will be if we get a good result later.
But thanks, Dave. Speak to you soon, mate.
Pleasure. See you again.
See you later.